6 years ago, I made a video talking about what it really took to play the game and earn VIP or top tier allocation status with a supercar manufacturer like Lamborghini, McLaren, Porsche, and of course, Ferrari. Now, Ferrari is the most iconic and enigmatic because they have the longest running history of producing the highest demand cars where it was super competitive in order to get whatever you want. And I thought it made sense today since we have now gotten past the F80 allocations, the LaFerrari successor. So if you didn't get a call from Ferrari, you are not getting one. And like the rest of the world, you'll be faced with the opportunity to pay whatever the market decides the pre-owned cars are worth. But also it makes sense to look back because the game has changed a lot because there are so many more people playing it. Now, over the years, I've had so many people come to me at events and things and say, Ed, thank you. I actually did find this video useful, which the entire comments of the first video were just like, who is watching this that's about to go spend millions and millions of dollars? They're probably not on YouTube, but it turns out they were on YouTube. And in many cases, they were sent that video from their dealership. So whatever dealer they were trying to build status with and order cars with, rather than them being the bad guy and saying, these are all the things that you need to start doing, they decided to just let me be the bad guy and tell people. And so it's gotten millions of views, but I think it's interesting because in that relatively short amount of time of 6 years, it has changed massively. And back then I described it using an acronym, LOVE, love, standing for loyalty, options, volume, and events, being the things that you really needed to focus on in order to start to gain and build that status with the manufacturer. And that was very true because especially 5 to 10 years ago, that second one, options, was the cheat code. And we'll talk about different times where there have been different cheat codes or different ways to sort of game the system into a higher status than you might ordinarily deserve just based on your track record and history of ordering new cars from the brand, because it isn't just that anymore. When they allocated the Enzo in 2002, 2003, that is what it was based on. You had to have ordered a ton of brand new Ferraris, spec'd them yourself, and taken delivery through your dealership, and that's how they were allocated. And in most cases, you would have had to have bought dozens of new Ferraris in order to be considered for an Enzo. With the LaFerrari, it changed a little bit, focused a little bit more on some additional criteria, events, and things like that. Also, the collection of cars that you were building and the ones that you continued to own. So you couldn't just buy them, keep them the regular, 6, 12, 24 months, however long they wanted you to have that particular model, and then sell it. You still needed to have a lot of them. And so when I made that video, you actually could have just gone and ordered hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of options on a car, and that would have got you in front of, in many cases, because you're going to the factory to order these cars, in front of Ferrari enough that you could have gained that kind of status. Now, again, I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in options on top of just a normal car, and not just on your special cars, on your GTC4 Lusso or your Portofino, and of course now your Roma and things like that. And so 6 years ago, if you had started on that process and you were super loyal to a specific brand, which I would say is really, really important now, there are people that have high status with every manufacturer, but honestly, today, you got to focus on one until you get to the point where you're being offered everything they have, and then you can kind of move on to the next one. And then, of course, ordering tons and tons of options, buying everything, one of every model that they produce. In many cases now you're having to buy 2, 3, 4 of each model because the newer cars are getting a little bit harder to sell in the last couple of years. And then of course events, going to whatever events you get invited to, pay whatever they ask to, and then that was really what it took back then. Now, since then, there have been 2 additional changes that were sort of like cheat codes that people used because there were so many people willing to put hundreds of thousands of dollars in options in every new car, multiples of each car, however many you wanted them to have. There were people walking into every Ferrari dealership saying, I am willing to do whatever it takes because I want to get that next really hard to get car. Also, in that period of time, we've had more competitive cars come out, the Icona series with Ferrari and things like that. And all of these rules still apply to the other manufacturers as well if you want to get high status with Porsche or Lamborghini, whatever. Ferrari's just a lot more competitive. Now, the first thing that you could do was just accumulate all of the previously significant cars. I had several people tell me, your video's right, but now you could just go out and buy a 288, F40, F50, Enzo, LaFerrari, and that would generally give you enough VIP status based on putting them all into the Ferrari app. Now, they all had to be registered in your personal name, but if you did so, you would have enough status to most likely get an F80 allocation. There was also racing, and we're going to talk about that. So your collection was one aspect and racing is the other. So now I guess we got to add those to the acronym, and so rather than LOVE, we got a C and an R. So Clover. There we go. CLOVER, collection, loyalty, options, volume, events, and racing. Racing could come in a couple of different forms for a while. If you were an active challenge car racer, that got you pretty much whatever you wanted in terms of new car allocation, especially as it pertained to like pistas, pista aperta, 812C, stuff like that. Now there's enough people willing to do that you do have to have some racing involvement. And then the third sort of cheat code was Corsa Clienti. So if you campaigned an XX car like an FXX or a 599XX, or if you had bought a Ferrari Formula One car, you could have them maintain that car. They have special racing days around the world every year, and you could go out, pay them honestly not that much money. Usually the events were only like $5,000 to $20,000. Again, we're talking about massive amounts of money, and so that, in this context, is a small amount of money, and you could go get to drive your car on the Nürburgring or on some track, and it would be a really, really cool experience that once again put you so close to the decision makers at Ferrari that they would just let you have just about whatever you wanted. And so again, those are in most cases being combined with all the other things. You're already buying one of everything that they sell. You're already having your special specs and options and colors, and you've paid them to name a color after you. Now you really have to do all of it. And I know that sounds crazy because we're going to run through what each of those things really looks like. But you could walk into a dealership and a lot of the sales guys are going to say, oh, it doesn't really take all that. I've got this customer and that customer that didn't do those things. But the problem is that they already have enough great customers that you're talking about having to jump over some very, very qualified buyers in line. So let's talk about that first one, your collection of cars. And that's the perfect way to mention our sponsor for today's video, Auto Tempest. You now don't just buy new cars, you've also got to buy, maintain, certify pre-owned cars, especially the pre-owned supercars. And so Auto Tempest is the best way to shop for your next car because they allow you to search the entire internet, which is extra important when you're shopping for an extra rare car because they compile the results from all the major listing sites into one place, autotempest.com, all the cars, one search. So if you are out there looking for a special color F50 or just a special color Special or Pista or something like that, Auto Tempest is the best way to find it as fast as possible and figure out if the asking prices, which are usually astronomical, are really in line with the rest of the market at large. And so it's where I start most of my days, and you supporting Auto Tempest and searching for your cars there, it's what makes us being able to make this content possible, Car Trek and the other things that we do with Auto Tempest. And so please check them out now at the link in the description below. Maybe you're not shopping for a garage or warehouse full of Ferraris, but whatever it is that you're looking for, Auto Tempest is the best way to find it. So you have to build a massive collection, and that will be partially from your ordering of new cars, but significantly from buying the old stuff. And I would say that if you wanted to buy an F90 or a car 10 years from now that's going to be ultra competitive, you would need to at least have an F80, which you'll have to probably go out and spend $5 to $6 million on based on the premium initially over it. It'll cool down eventually, so maybe you can buy one for 4 or 5 at some point. But you'd also need to buy a LaFerrari, which can be down to $3 to $4 million. So you have to have those. Honestly, because of the value that it has, I would buy the rest of them as well, because it's the only part of this equation that will not ultimately make you lose a lot of money. Okay, so today to buy a 288 F40 F50 Enzo LaFerrari plus whatever it's going to cost you to buy an F80 is probably going to be $20 to $25 million. Now, they don't all have to be in the US, so at times it was cheaper to own them overseas but still be able to put them in your app as being one of your cars. Now it's pretty much a world market, so you're just going to have to do what you have to do. But yeah, everything's gotten expensive, and in the last 6 years, almost all of those cars have doubled in value because of this exact reason. It has gotten so much more competitive because so many people know if they don't have them, then they're not going to be as eligible or even eligible at all for the next car. Now, if you want Icona cars, you also have to buy those. So you need to buy an SP1 or SP2. You don't have to own both, and an SP3 to get whatever SP4 happens to be. Now, those are kind of a forked allocation because you're not allocated cars in exactly the same way to get an SP3 as you are for an F80 or a LaFerrari, but generally it's all going to start to overlap, and if you're going to get one, you want to get them all, and so I guess you're just going to have to buy everything. Now, fortunately, I suppose, Ferrari Financial Services will help you to finance that $20 million worth of cars through their own stuff, and that is actually better because obviously they're making some interest money on you, so yeah, maybe you don't have to outlay 8 figures worth of money. You're just going to pay $1.5 million in interest to float these cars as part of your collection. But that allows Ferrari to see into your personal finances, believe that you're going to be in a position to buy the next one, pre-qualify you maybe, I don't know. But that's a little harder with some of the SP cars because they are show display only. I actually don't know if Ferrari Financial will let you finance an SP2 or SP3. A lot of banks wouldn't because they don't have exactly the same types of titles and things like that. But I'm sure that you would find a way. Also, you can't sell your collection of cars until you have gotten its replacement. So you couldn't sell your F12 TDF until your 812C came in. In most cases, these guys are holding on to all of them anyway. And so even though you're kind of building this equity opportunity by being able to buy these cars at MSRP rather than the market premiums, which could be $1 million over, you can't realize those gains because you're just not allowed to sell them that early. Or if you do, as with the SF90XX program, if you did not currently own an SF90, you were not granted an XX allocation. And so a lot of people had to scramble and reorder another SF90 so they would have one to be able to get the car that they should have been entitled to, at least they thought they should have been, based on their status and previous orders of the cars. Now again, you're going to want to put $100,000 to $200,000 or more in options on each car, hopefully in a distinctive spec that gets you recognized by the factory. So they say, oh, that's Ed's car in Verde Ed going down the assembly line. I'm sure he's going to love it alongside his other Verde Ed cars. And again, they do notice this stuff and it really helps. Now, of course, when you put that many options on a car and you combine it with the fact that the market for the normal Ferraris is not nearly as healthy as it was 3, 4, 5 years ago, you are going to lose a lot of money owning these cars. And so I would estimate probably $500,000 a year of losses as you order 4 or 5 of these cars a year, maybe even more, to make sure that you're always getting everything new and you have more opportunities to go visit the factory, spec out your next 3 cars, come home, take delivery, barely drive them, consign them with the dealership, pay whatever they want, never argue about anything. If it shows up scratched, you don't care. You never make a fuss. You don't lemon law a car. You don't worry if it's in for a repair that takes forever. Again, you have to be very nice to these people if you want them to give you the stuff that's really hard to get. And that new challenge in ever really breaking even is an interesting phenomenon that is impacting all of the high-end manufacturers. It means that some people are saying, wait a minute, for that amount of money, I could buy all the Bugattis, I could buy all the Paganis, I could buy all the Koenigsegg's, I could buy all the Lambos, and maybe I can have more fun with those other brands. Now, it's different than the experience that you would have with Ferrari, but it at least begs the question of, is this now the best place to invest your money? So we've got loyalty, we've got options, we've got volume, and the next is events. Ferrari has hospitality at virtually every Formula One race, all of cavalcade events, drives, challenge races. You want to go to all of them you can. If you'd gone to cavalcade last year, you would have been eligible to get a cavalcade spec of your next car. So whether it was an 812C or an SF90 or whatever it is, you could get a special color option. Now that did not grant you the allocation for the car. So if you saw somebody get a Cavalcade SF90 or 812 rather than 812 comp, it was generally because they did not get an allocation for the harder to get car. Either way, valuable, very expensive, and some people didn't want them and things like that. There are times like that where Ferrari says you don't have to order it, which is a trap. I know people that got allocated SP1s and SP2s that's what Ferrari told them. They said, you don't have to take it. We understand that it doesn't have a windshield. You can't register it all over the world. It's a hard car to own and live with, and it's millions of dollars. We understand if you don't want to take it. However, if you did not take your allocation, somebody who did was offered the chance to get the SP3. So you missed out on the much more interesting, the highest demand car they've had in a long time in the SP3 by not having your SP2 or your SP1. So you got to go to events, and now, of course, you do have to go racing. So whether it's challenge racing, now you can just enter some races, buy your challenge car, wrap it in a cool livery, go a couple laps, and then park it to not worry about crashing or being overly competitive with these guys. Or you could have a Formula One car or an XX car. Now, again, I understand that we're talking about spending tens of millions of dollars in order to get allocated a car for a couple $1,000,000 less than you could just go out there and buy it. And previously, I would have said that you were probably going to spend $1 to $2 million of like true expense, lost money, not in what you spend on the cars, but what you actually lose owning them, financing them, and things like that. Now it is certainly $5 to $10 million that you're going to lose. And so you're talking about decades to break even based on the equity that you could build in these really hard to get cars. And so now it is really a situation where you are paying that huge amount of money simply in order to have the experience of having the relationship with the brand, ordering the cars and all that. And that is because there are that many people who are willing to jump through all those hoops, to take all those steps and do all those things to buy these cars. And so to summarize, it's really simple. Clover. Build your collection, be very loyal to the brand and nice to them, order all the options you can possibly imagine, order the volume, all the cars, always, as many as they ask you to, go to all of their events, and in some way, go racing with them. And that is the current recipe to getting the next car. So if you do all those things, more power to you, and congratulations on your success in life otherwise. But I believe that you will, in about a decade or so, have the F90 or whatever the 90th anniversary celebratory supercar is from Ferrari. And once again, I want to thank Auto Tempest for supporting VINwiki this month, for sponsoring this video, and for so many years of supporting the channel. We can't do this without them, but honestly, I can't find the cars that I want to buy without Auto Tempest. So go out and find your dream Ferrari collection, whether or not you have the ability to buy it. But regardless, I appreciate them for supporting us, and I very much appreciate you for supporting them. Autotempest.com, all the cars, one search.